Welcome to the Breakaway with David and Fabian. And today we have a very special guest, Nathan Hochman, who is running to lead us out of this hell that we are living in Los Angeles. He is running for the District Attorney of Los Angeles, and it's so great to have Nathan on. Thank you for being here.
Great to be on. Thank you for having me.
So to catch people up on who haven't been tuning in to the state of the race, you are projected to win the race right now with about a poll that is around, they say you're leading by 30 points at the moment. And it looks like the big funders that Gascon had in the past, such as George Soros, is no longer donating to his campaign. Apparently, he's giving him zero money on this campaign around. Why do you think that is? Why do you think you're so far ahead in the polls? And why do you think all his other supporters and people who have given to his campaign have abandoned him?
So I think what the polls reflect, and again, I tell the team like we're 30 points down, not 30 points up, because you never know what'll happen the next 3 weeks. And we got to keep the pedal to the floorboard all the way to November 5th. But I think what the polls reflect is a deep unpopularity with George Gascon. You know, he came in having never prosecuted or defended a single criminal case in his whole career, though he's been the DAs of San Francisco and LA. And when he showed up, he didn't ask any of his 750 prosecutors what they think should actually be done. He just imposed pro-criminal extreme blanket policies that said juveniles under the age of 18 wouldn't be prosecuted for stealing under $950. The gun enhancements, if you use a gun during a crime, it's not going to get prosecuted as an enhancement. If you're a gang member and that motivated you to commit a violent crime, he's not prosecuting the gang enhancement. So it's not a shock that violent crimes, property crimes, hate crimes, fentanyl poisons, shoplifting, human trafficking is up double or triple digits since that guy got into office. So I think that that poll shows that deep unpopularity with Gascon. And in some ways, it also shows a hope with my candidacy, because I bring 34 years of criminal justice experience, 10 of it as a prosecutor, being a federal prosecutor and a U.S. Assistant Attorney General, presidential appointment, Senate confirmation, as well as being a defense attorney for 24 years, representing defendants in hundreds of cases. I've even been the president of the LA City Ethics Commission. So I bring that experience, and what I advocate is a rejection of extreme policies. I reject decarceration. That's what Gascon calls his policy that decides that certain criminals and certain crimes won't be prosecuted no matter what the facts in the law are. And I also reject mass incarceration, another policy not based on the facts in the law. Where I come down is the middle. I call it the hard middle because it requires hard work. You can't do lazy blanket policies. You got to look at each case individually. Look at the individual defendant and the defendant's background, the crime committed and the impact on the victim, to determine who the true threats are to our public safety, often the repeat offenders who need to be behind bars, and quite honestly, the ones that aren't. Your first-time nonviolent offender, if they violate society's laws, they got to pay a debt back. But the punishment needs to be proportional for the crime. So that could be community service. It could be restitution, pay it back if you stole something. Or if you have a serious drug addiction, we'll give you a choice through a diversion program. Either go to jail or go through an 18-month rigorous, one day at a time diversion program. And if you finish it, we'll give you a certificate and wipe your record clean of that crime. So I think when voters hear this hard middle, common sense, smart, effective, and proportional approach, and my focus on deterrence, deterring criminals from committing crimes rather than mass incarceration, they're ready for a change. People say to me every day, enough is enough. And I have met with literally thousands of people around this county, from your single moms trying to raise teenage kids and teach them right from wrong, to store owners, victims groups, law enforcement, prosecutors, neighborhood and community associations, Black, white, Latino, Asian, every religious group out there. And LA is ready for a change, and that change is now.
Well said. Well said. I did want to point to a quick issue that's very close to home. A good buddy of mine, one of my best friends, he owns a few coffee shops right around the Hollywood Boulevard area. And he's telling me that the people that attend his coffee shop, his patrons, are being harassed, are being violently attacked. When he calls the police, and he's friends with some of the sheriffs at this point and some people in LAPD, they say, yeah, we can't really do anything unless they actually do something violent just because we got so many people breathing down our necks. Our hands are basically tied. He called the police. He called 911 to report someone had broken something. Someone threw something at his window and shattered it. He was on hold for like 40 minutes. I mean, what has happened? I mean, it seems like we've had a complete breakdown in the way things used to be or should be, and now we have this. What is that, and how do you aim to fix it?
So sadly, Gascon, his legacy is probably creating the most dysfunctional DA's office, maybe in LA County history. I mean, he has got the 750 prosecutors actually voted 98% to support his recall. He's facing 20 retaliation suits from deputy DAs who stood up to him, and he basically retaliated against them. He's lost 200 of some of the most experienced deputy district attorneys who just refused to work for him. And that sort of, that demoralization has crossed over into law enforcement. And you're right, I hear often that law enforcement officers say to victims, our hands are tied. DA is not going to prosecute, so why actually should we investigate this case? So here's my message to law enforcement and the prosecutors and the victims, and by the way, also to criminals. Their hands aren't going to be tied anymore. It doesn't mean we're going back to mass incarceration, but we will now give a fair look to any case that law enforcement wants to give us, focusing just on the facts and the law. Can they hit beyond a reasonable doubt the highest standard of evidence in our land when they bring the DA's office a case? And so we're going to be sending that message as importantly to criminals. Because again, our goal is to deter them from committing crimes. So how do you accomplish that? You set out the lines really clearly. Those are the laws in our state and in our locality. And you need to consistently, fairly, and impartially enforce those laws, but make sure they understand there are real consequences on the other side of the line. And I think if criminals get that message, we don't have to go back to the 1960s or 70s. We just got to go back to 2014, because that was considered 10 years ago our safest year in the last 50 years. Because in that, DA was doing her job. Law enforcement had a partner in the DA's office. Victims understood if you dialed 911, not only would someone pick up the phone, but you could actually get justice for the harm you suffered. And as importantly, criminals understood that the lines were real, and in record numbers, they weren't committing crimes, thus saving a whole lot of victims in the process.
Absolutely. And to stay on this topic of public safety and crime, I mean, how does your approach differ from your opponents, George Gascon's, in terms of, actually prosecuting these serious crimes and as well as addressing perhaps the root causes of them?
So you have to do both, actually. So on the one hand, you got to prioritize public safety and take off this political agenda that George Gascon has put as a filter on who gets prosecuted. I mean, for, I don't know, the entire length of the LA County DA's office, which is over 100 years, they looked at the facts and the law. There wasn't a political filter that you had to go through to make a criminal justice decision. Then George Gascon comes in and enacts these blanket pro-criminal policies that put that filter in place. I take that filter off. No politics. My whole campaign running as an independent is about taking politics out of the DA's office. But you also have to focus on the problems that George Gascon highlighted, whether it's police accountability, whether it's explicit and implicit racial bias in the system, whether or not it's getting factually innocent people out of prison, whether or not it's resentencing issues. These are the kind of problems that are real. George Gascon, to the extent he did anything good, highlighted these problems. It's his solutions that I couldn't disagree with more. And if anything, the number of victims who are people of color in LA County has skyrocketed. 87% of the victims of homicide in LA County are Blacks and Hispanics. 71% of all violent crimes are Blacks and Hispanics. 4% of LA County's population is represented by Black women, but they represent 28% of the victims of violent crimes. He's forgotten to focus on the victims of crimes and the root causes that are causing these people to be victimized and who is victimizing them. I will focus on real and effective criminal justice reform while prioritizing public safety.
To touch on that, obviously during COVID, things were extremely bad. They've gotten a little better, I would say, just a scotch, but I've had many friends who have been robbed, who have been shot, who have been stolen from. and they really can't get any restitution, especially when they're somewhere out in Beverly Hills, eating somewhere like the over on Sunset, and no one can really do anything. Can you talk to them and tell them what you would do for those situations, how to feel more safer in public, and just kind of so to appease them, maybe they're tuning in for the first time into the race now?
Sure. Let's focus on residential burglaries for a moment. What we've seen with residential burglaries is a lot of the people are coming through the border. These are Chileans, Venezuelans, Colombians. They literally come across the border. They're very sophisticated. They rob houses generally without people in them. And then if they get caught, they know they'll be arrested in the morning, out by the afternoon, on the plane, back to wherever country they go to, and you'll never see them again. And what happened is also the gangs in South LA and sort of the South LA, Pico Rivera area, they looked at what the Chileans were doing. They said, we got to get some of that action. They happen not to care, by the way, if you're actually home. They'll just come in, take your stuff. If you're home, good luck. Hopefully they won't hurt you. But what we have to do is we have to lead a federal, state, and local task force that focuses on all aspects of the crime. If it's people coming over the border, that's the exclusive jurisdiction of the federal government. But if it's people in LA County who are doing it, you got to tell the police, look, if you do your job and you go ahead and build these cases and arrest these people, we'll do our job in the DA's office. We'll prosecute them. We'll give them, again, this hard middle approach and give them a proportional punishment for their crime, but hold them accountable. And as importantly, work to actually keep them with an adequate and sufficient bail, so people don't get emboldened by thinking, look, even if I get caught, I'll literally be arrested in the morning and out by the afternoon before the police finish the report on me. So that is the message I can send. And to give you a contrast, when George Gascon announced his new initiative for residential burglaries about a month ago, I waited with bated breath to see what it was. He announced a hotline number, and so I called it. And it literally here, when you call it, it says, if this is a robbery in progress or an emergency, hang up and dial 911. Otherwise, leave your message at the sound of the tone beep. That is, talk about not giving comfort to people who are going through these residential burglaries. That is almost exhibit A of a DA who's abdicated his responsibility to public safety. So the goal, again, is to send the message to the criminals. I'm not looking to put you in jail, but I absolutely will if you violate the law. And I'm going to hope that you actually understand I'm going to do it so you're deterred from committing these crimes in the first place.
And I want to turn to San Francisco, where he was also in office there. And I know I was researching, and property crime increased something on the order of 40%. The police, and there's interviews of this, the police are speaking out and said, we can't do anything because they're telling us if there's no physical violations or physical harm, that just go ahead and file a report. We're not going to come down. So it seems to me that these policies that have been enacted that destroyed San Francisco are now the same policies that are being enacted here. We know that Gavin Newsom installed him for the first time, and then he ran under his own will and won. But what is it about these policies that they're so apt on going after and pushing, even when they see that they don't work? Like, what is that?
See, these policies were very popular 4 years ago because you got to remember the fairly unique circumstances we were living in. I'll speak for LA County, but it's true of San Francisco and a whole lot of jurisdictions around the country. This is your post-George Floyd, defund the police movement, protests and riots in the streets. And people were looking for the George Gascons of the world because they said, look, we can deal with systemic racism. We will let out violent and serious criminals before they serve their full sentences. We won't prosecute them to the full extent of the law on the front end. But they made those two promises, but made a third. We'll keep you safe in the meantime, or safer. The first two promises they kept. They did let out the violent and serious criminals. They didn't prosecute them, but they didn't keep the third promise. And that promise has actually gone in the opposite direction. People are less safe. San Francisco got rid of its Gascon in 2022 through a recall. That was Chesa Boudin. Seattle got rid of its Gascon. It was the city attorney. You had St. Louis get rid of its Gascon. You had Chicago. Their Gascon didn't even run for re-election. And then you had up in a jurisdiction back in April, May, there was 93% Democrat. They had a Gascon named Mike Schmidt. And unfortunately, it's not the Mike Schmidt of Philadelphia Phillies third baseman fame, but the Gascon version of a Mike Schmidt. And he had, I mean, if you've ever been to downtown Portland in the last 3 years,
Wow.
they turned a beautiful downtown area into a war zone. So sure enough, 93% Democrat, but they had a Republican turned independent, which is basically what I am, run against Mike Schmidt. The good tidings are his first name was Nathan as well, Nathan Vasquez, and he beat that Mike Schmidt by 8 points. So
Wow.
what I see is turning since 2022 is that once this social experiment gets played out and people's safety takes a huge hit, that issue crosses all political lines. Because, they say the old adage that criminals don't ask for your party affiliation before they rob or shoot you. And sure enough, people, again, across political lines, Democrats, independents, Republicans, are waking up to what you've just described. Their homes are being broken into. Their cars are being broken into. Their stores are being ransacked. Fentanyl poisoning will kill more 18 to 35-year-olds than anything else out there. And at least for LA, we're the capital of human trafficking. I mean, this has been a failed social experiment. And I think, again, going back to that 30-point lead I have in the polls, that is reflective of that failed social experiment.
Yeah, yeah, David. The story you were just telling me about, exactly what he's speaking about, where someone felt what these policies did to them, and then now are switching their party affiliation. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. We actually just saw somebody come out, a prominent individual, a political commentator, part of a left-leaning organization, came out essentially and said that she can no longer be represented by the left. She's not essentially diverting to the right, but she can be represented anymore by the left because she lives in LA and she experienced a sexual assault by a homeless individual. And unfortunately, when she came out and talked about this, she just got an enormous backlash from it, saying that how dare you talk about the homeless community like this, called her a racist, even though she didn't even mention any of that policy or the race. And those policies, essentially, in that rhetoric, completely disenfranchised her. So, and just to continue to, I mean, I hear you guys talking about LA, Portland, and it seems so much similar to where I live in Atlanta. The district attorney and especially what happened since George Floyd, just everybody relaxed on crime, and homelessness seems to play a key factor in all of this. And I mean, what is the plan for you if you do win the election and you do become the district attorney in terms of the homelessness factor in LA?
Great question. So the solution to homelessness can only be done as a partnership where the DA and law enforcement join social service organizations and nonprofits in order to tackle this problem, which is, almost epidemic in Los Angeles County. We have over 70,000 homeless people on the streets in Los Angeles County. I mean, it's more than some cities. It's like having a small city of homeless people. Not even a large city of homeless people. And it's only been growing every single year. So what you can do, I'll give you an example. There's something called the HOST team in Los Angeles. It's the HOST, Homeless Outreach Services Team. What it is a partnership between deputy sheriffs that are trained to deal with the homeless, the Los Angeles Homeless Service Authority, the Department of Mental Health, Department of Public Works, and Department of Vocational Services. They all go out as a team to a homeless encampment, and over an 8-week period, they enact a 5-point plan. They identify everyone there. Basically, they go and they shake their hands and they introduce themselves. They then assess their needs. Is it a veteran who needs to get to the VA? Is it someone who just lost their job? We got to get them a job. Do they have a serious drug addiction or mental health issue? We got to get them services. They then do the outreach. They try to place these people in areas and homes, in permanent or temporary homes that have the services available. If that doesn't happen, they post. They put a 14-day notice, and 14 days later, they clear the homeless encampment. They've been able to move thousands of people because they treat the homeless humanely. They put them where they can actually get some services. And in the last 7 years, they've only had to arrest 2. So this is an example where law enforcement and the DA's office works with all the other groups and has successfully achieved, in this case, relocating homeless people to better circumstances for them and for society. We just need to scale it up. George Gascon, he basically has disempowered as best he can law enforcement from doing its job.
Well said. I do want to touch on the issue of homelessness, but in the area of encampments on the street. So Sunset Studios, which is over on Sunset, right off Sunset in Cahuenga, they were one of the most historic recording studios. People have recorded there from all walks of life, and they were saying that they may have to shut down because there are so many homeless people living in tents out front. They went and bought these planters that they've placed in order to create some space so their patrons can go inside. The city then came and told them that they had to be removed. I'm not exactly sure for what reason. So what's your stance on this? How do you feel about, I know it's not specifically your area, but law enforcement is the one telling them whether or not they can or can't have it, and those orders are coming from above. So what do you think about that?
So again, when law enforcement right now enters a homeless encampment, unless they're working with the host team, here's what they see. They see people shooting up with meth, heroin, and fentanyl. But the current DA has a policy that says he's not going to prosecute those type of offenses. They see low levels of vandalism, low levels of prostitution. They'll see even low levels of violence. And rather than actually do their jobs for the most part, they know the DA is not going to go ahead and do his job, so they keep walking. So we need to empower law enforcement to deal with the problem and not have to have private citizens rely on private remedies to try and deal with the homeless problem in front of their businesses. That is an unsustainable course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I get it. I get the frustration. I mean, if someone is literally defecating and using drugs in front of your business, and they're doing it every day, and they're graffitiing your business, or they're leaving an incredible mess, and your employees have to walk by, or your customers have to walk by it every day, at some point you're either going to go out of business, you're going to move, or you're going to try and do something yourself. Now, ideally, they would probably have coordinated with the city a lot better and come up with some agreed upon solution. Maybe they would say, look, we'll pay for it. We'll install it. We just need, your agreement to do it. So I don't know in that particular situation if there was just a breakdown in communications, or they decided to act before they saw any permission and were seeking forgiveness rather than permission. I have no idea. But ideally, we'd work with, private individuals, social service groups, nonprofits. You work with them collectively, and then you put some, the force of the DA's office and law enforcement as part of that partnership. Hopefully we don't get to the situation where you see in front of Sunset Studios that they try to do something to help, and the city's now pushing back against it strongly.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want to also talk to you about the drug prosecution, especially fentanyl crisis, because fentanyl doesn't discriminate against you, based on what your political ideology is, race, whatever it is. It gets everybody. We see that here in Atlanta, and that is a big, crisis that is happening in LA right now. So what kind of steps would you take to, address the trafficking and distribution of fentanyl and just other dangerous substances that we see in LA?
So for the last 3 years, I've been trying to sound the crisis alarm about fentanyl, because I'm watching it literally grow in LA County, or for that matter, a lot of other places, exponentially. I mean, 1 becomes 2, 2, 4, 4, 8, so that now it is the leading killer of 18 to 35-year-olds in our society. 2 milligrams will kill you in 2 minutes. It's 100 times stronger than morphine and 50 times stronger than heroin. And by the way, the new synthetic opiates that are out there, Trank and a few things, they don't even respond to Narcan. So
Wow.
things,
That's crazy.
you will be assuredly dead within a matter of months, or certainly within a year. I mean, it really is that powerful a drug and that lethal a drug. So what I believe you need to do is a massive education and enforcement effort. You got to get to kids. You got to make sure kids understand this is not about getting high anymore. The DEA estimates that of those millions of counterfeit pills, we're talking your counterfeit Oxycontins, your Xanaxes, your Adderalls, your Percocet, 7 out of 10 have a lethal dose. Those odds are worse than Russian roulette, than literally putting a bullet in a 6-shooter, spinning it, putting it up to your head, and firing. The odds are worse than by taking these pills than actually doing Russian roulette. So education, we got to get to the kids in the schools, and then you got to enforce it. I would treat fentanyl dealers as fentanyl murderers or poisoners, because that's exactly what they're doing. They're peddling pills that they know will kill people, and they should be prosecuted for the second-degree murders they're committing. And again, if you send that message really loud and clear, here's my goal. My goal is that a fentanyl dealer chooses a different occupation and doesn't kill people. That's my goal. I don't need to, I mean, if I, at the end of 4 years, all I've done is fill the prisons with fentanyl dealers or murderers, I have failed. I have failed to get the message out. I failed to keep people alive. I need these murderers to understand that they will be held accountable, and the consequences will be severe. So don't do it.
Nathan,
Yeah,
I wanted to just 1 second, Fabian. I wanted to ask, why do you feel like the current district attorney doesn't actually implement such a harsh approach to deter from such events happening, or from individuals like fentanyl dealers having such jobs?
It's interesting. He just comes from a different perspective where he views criminals as almost victims of the system, as opposed to the victims that are actually being victimized by the criminals. And when you come from it from that perspective, then you think to yourself, well, if we just show some leniency here, maybe that will make up for the disadvantages they have suffered in life so far, and they will therefore commit less crimes. And their friends who are watching these lenient punishments occur, they'll somehow learn a strange lesson that we should commit less crime than more crime because the punishment's gotten more lenient. Again, it defies common sense. It defies what every parent has ever tried to teach a kid for the last, 50,000 years as to how punishments work and how you want to deter illegal conduct. A single mom asked me the other day, because we were talking about her raising a teenage son. And she's trying to teach this son the difference between right and wrong, that stealing has consequences. And he shows her a video of 50 kids literally riding their bicycles to a 7-Eleven, dropping the bikes, running inside, grabbing everything, stuffing it in their pants, and biking out. And she said to me, when did the laws become suggestions? That was a great question. Actually, it kind of took me aback for a second. You said, you know what? You're right. Because a suggestion, you follow it, you don't follow it, there's no consequence for not following a suggestion. But that is a very dangerous principle to be teaching young people, that our laws are suggestions, because when these teenagers go in their 20s, 30s, and 40s, if that's the mindset they go in with, you're going to see a price that society is going to pay that it'll be enormous.
yeah, absolutely. I know this is not a philosophical talk, but what I see is a neo-Marxist combined with some critical race theory, combined with some leftist tendencies, which is the reason why, as you said, he believes that the victims, that the perpetrators are actually the victims, and we have to give them some kind of restitution by allowing them to take out their anger on everyone else, because there's this patriarchal society that has made them what they are. I think it's completely bonkers. I do want to pull up a piece from the debate that you had with Gascon just the other day, and I want to go ahead and play this quickly.
Work, and then they lost their job, and they become unhoused. Okay, Mr. Garcia.
Sorry, let me slow that down.
If you heard that answer, I'd start getting your bags packed and get ready to go. Because again, what this DA has enacted is blanket policies that say he is not going to prosecute quality of life crimes. What does that involve? That if a police officer comes up to a homeless encampment and sees someone shooting up with meth, heroin, fentanyl, he won't let him prosecute. If he sees them engaged in vandalism, no. Disorderly conduct, no. Criminal threats, no. Loitering for prostitution, no. So under this DA, the police basically look at it and just keep walking. We can actually do something about it, but the DA's office has to be a partner with the Los Angeles Homeless Service Authority, the Department of Mental Health, the Department of Public Works, the Department of Vocational Services, and go into those communities like the host team does, the homeless.
And
well, it's good I'm consistent. Apparently, I'm very consistent.
Well, the thing I saw about him as I watched the debate is I don't know if he knows that he's going to lose, or I don't know if he knows that he's in a very precarious position, because he didn't act like that. He acted like everything was fine, like it was actually you that had the wrong mindset on why things are actually getting better. And he was trying to convince even the moderators that no, those facts are using, yeah, but in my second term, I'm going to just work on making incremental things incrementally better. Like, does he really understand what's happening, or is he just obfuscating the truth, do you think?
I think he is so, in some ways, self-deluded that he doesn't understand that when it's not working, you got to do something different. You got to pivot. You got to course correct. Let me give you an example that sort of, is the perfect example on his delusional state that he thinks everything's going great. In January of 2024, he had the opportunity to appoint a new chief of staff. Now, if you have no prosecutorial experience yourself, you'd probably bring in the person from the DA's office that has the most prosecutorial experience to show that experience really matters. And if you have rocky relations with law enforcement, you want the DA, the deputy DA, with the best relations with law enforcement. So who did he put in as his chief of staff? He put in a person that has never been a prosecutor in her entire career. She was a deputy public defender. And most significantly, during the defund the police movement in 2020, she pictured herself, or she put out a post of herself on her social media wearing a t-shirt that said that police are trained to kill us, calling the police barbarians in an occupying army. A slap in her face to his own prosecutors, and a real slap in the face to law enforcement when he put effectively an enemy of law enforcement as his chief of staff. When I say this guy has double and triple down on a losing proposition, he absolutely has. Because if he had enacted it in 2020, found out it wasn't working by 2021, course corrected, pivoted, we might not be having this discussion, and a lot of people, a lot of victims would not have been victimized in Los Angeles County over the last 3 years. But he didn't. He's double and triple down, and this is why he needs to go on November 5th.
Absolutely, and hopefully that happens. When I see stuff like this happening, when they start to deny the facts and the reality, to me it's very laughable, because in order for them to maintain the narrative that they're partaking in, they start to have to somehow deny objective facts, data, overall reality. And that's why I can see a 30-point lead occur in a race like this. I want to also ask you about something. So in LA, I understand it's a progressive city, and they essentially were victims of that post George Floyd defund the police movement. But people still believe in the area that there's over policing, and it seems like there should be a fine line between actually prosecuting crimes so you can uphold public safety, but also ensuring that there isn't over policing and that there's good conduct. How do you find that balance as a DA?
Well, here's what I will bring to the DA's office that they've never had before. I will be the first DA in history who's not only been a prosecutor, but a defense attorney. The first DA in history that's not only personally prosecuted dirty cops, and we're talking in the 1990s, I and a team of prosecutors went after 16 deputy sheriffs who were stealing drugs, guns, and money from drug dealers. We convicted them all. I have no tolerance. If a law enforcement officer effectively becomes a criminal, we're going to go after that law enforcement officer as well. But my brother and I also started the LA Sheriff's Foundation in that summer of 2020, because we believe that the law enforcement actually need more resources rather than less. And we've raised them over $1 million. We've gotten them drones for air rescue that have saved lives. We got a drone for the bomb squad. When a car, seriously injured a group of 76 cadets on a training run and just mowed through them. We went to the hospitals. We met with the cadets. We not only gave them financial gifts, we told them that the public is there for them, which they actually appreciated even more. So I will bring that sensibility into the DA's office and send the loud and clear message to law enforcement. If someone crosses the line, we're going to prosecute them. And you know what I found very interesting is that what law enforcement tells me back. They say that nobody hates a bad cop more than a good cop, because those bad cops ruin the reputation for the overwhelming number of officers who, when the bullets are flying in a building, they run into the building to keep us safe. Those officers deserve our respect, our admiration, and if I'm the DA, our partnership.
My cousin is a CHP, and he tells me he works in the Riverside area mostly, but he talks to me about when he was working out in Los Angeles, he felt like he had no support compared to when you work down in somewhere like Riverside. The structure there is more supportive of law enforcement. I wanted to touch on something that I heard you say earlier, and also in the debate, and to get some more clarity into it, because to me, it just sounds insane. But was it that a majority of the prosecutors that work for him signed a letter against him? Can you explain to that a little bit?
So George Gascon was facing a recall in 2022. It didn't actually go forward because they didn't get enough signatures. It's pretty controversial, but it didn't end up.
I was going to touch on that as well. I'm glad you mentioned it.
It didn't end up on the ballot. is what it ultimately happened, because you have to get a certain number of signatures in LA County to actually get it to qualify for the ballot. And they, according to the county recorder, they fell short. But they took a sort of a poll of all the 750 prosecutors, and they said, how many of you backed the recall? 98% backed his recall.
Wow.
And I've actually over 300 prosecutors to individually endorse me in this race, which is incredible given the fact that Gascon has a history of retaliating against people who stand up against him. These folks basically have said, and I got the endorsement of their union. I've met with over 350 of them. And they basically said, look, we are going to put literally our own careers on the line to make it clear to the public that this guy has failed. And we want a new DA. And they got to know me. They saw what I could do for them. That I believe that they, the deputy district attorneys, are the greatest asset of a DA's office. And my job is to maximize the greatest asset, which is them. So I've taken that message to them in 11 now different meetings across this county. And they say that the hour and a half they've spent with me is often longer than they've spent with George Gascon in 3.5 years. So again, these are solved problems. We can solve them. I'm going to have a fired up, talented, diverse group of prosecutors who've been dying to do their job for the last 3.5 years. We'll let them do their job. Law enforcement will no longer have the excuse that our hands are tied. You will not be able to hear that excuse if I'm the DA. They're going to do their job. I think they're really looking forward to doing their job. And then the message will get sent to victims that we're supporting you, and criminals, beware.
David, quickly, I'm going to throw it over to you. I wanted to actually mention the fact that that he spoke about with the recall. So they needed 566,800 signatures. They got 715,000 signatures. Then they had a 5% random sample of the total signatures. Then they announced that it would proceed to check all the ballots. On August 15, 2022, the petition failed because the county clerk said that 195,700 signatures were invalid. Now, if you take away the 195,000 from the original 715 that were submitted, they needed 566,000. They fell about 30,000 short, so, which is, I mean, I'll just leave it at that. But just go ahead, David.
Something with recalls in California just seems like a great movement, and then something happens like that.
Yeah.
But hey, now we have a race. I want to touch base with something you mentioned earlier, and I completely agree with you. I don't believe that the district attorney office should be politicized. I don't think that politics or political ideology should be a part of overall this side of the administrative state. But what would you do in terms of, let's hypothetically say that the governor of California somehow begins to wage war against you or the sheriff's department and trying to essentially make you go a Gascon route here? What would you do? How would you still provide the department with the resources that they need and give the cops not handicap the cops there?
So here's an interesting point on the power of the DA. The LA County DA takes no orders from the governor, the attorney general, the mayor, the city council, the board of supervisors, the sheriff, or the police chief. As Gascon proved on his first day, first hour, first email in office, when he issued 9 special directives that literally changed the course of criminal justice in LA County in favor of criminals and away from victims, it's a governing body of one. By the way, that's why George Soros targeted DAs across the country, because he realized that, sure, you want to get a president in place, that's hundreds of millions, or nowadays over $1 billion.
Yep.
Governors, really expensive. Senators, 1 of 100. Congressmen, 1 of 435. But DAs, 1 of 1, and you can change criminal justice on a dime on day one. Or in my case, restore public safety on day one. You have that power. So if the governor's interesting, because the governor has actually been pushing back against certain officials in LA City and LA County who want to slow walk, dealing with the homeless. And he came down himself to a homeless encampment on state property and removed the homeless encampment. He came down when those train robberies were happening in LA. You might remember that. and they were literally robbing the trains and taking the stuff out the back, the governor flew down, didn't meet with Gascon, didn't meet with his own attorney general, and was actually seen picking up the garbage and putting it in the garbage bins himself and saying, "What the heck is going on down here?" So Gascon, if he wants to stand against public safety, he does so at his own peril. If he wants to be a partner in getting the mission done, I invite anybody from any part of the political spectrum that they are on mission and they want to bring safety to the people of Los Angeles County, they will have a partner in Nathan Hochman.
Well said. I wish Newsom would have done what he did for President Xi when he visited and cleaned up things as easily as he did when Xi visited. But so I did want to talk about, I guess, constitutional rights. Our buddy Ryan Heath, he's a founder of the Gavel Project, which they help freedom of speech issues and you know the fight for issues like that. And one of his cases was in California where a child was essentially during COVID that they were forced to mask up. The child refused. They put him in what is essentially a cage throughout his schooling through that year because they didn't want him to be around kids. And he has a whole case coming up against that. I know the sheriff over in Riverside was, you know, fought with Newsom based on things, but where do you stand on that? I know we have another mask mandate for certain individuals and certain professions that are coming in next month or so for the winter, at least as from what I've heard. I'm not exactly correct or sure, but where do you stand on that? When you have mandates coming from the government or from the state government down to the city level, and then having to waste police resources on these things instead of actually fighting crime?
So here's the overall philosophy for the position of district attorney. When you raise your hand, you swear the oath to that you're going to uphold all the laws of the state of California, the California Constitution, the U.S. Constitution. There's no asterisk. There's no crossing your fingers, that you only get to enforce the laws that you like, and you have to enforce the ones that you don't. So if a mandate is not the law, then the job of a DA is not to enforce a non-law. If it's a suggestion, the DA doesn't need to enforce suggestions. Suggestions can be enforced or not enforced, but if they don't have the power of law, then if someone breaks a suggestion or doesn't follow a suggestion, that is not a violation of the law. So that's how I view, quite candidly, all the laws on the books, is that I'm not running to run, for the state legislature. I'm not running for Congress. I'm not running to be governor. I'm running to be the DA to uphold the laws and send, again, crystal clear messages. And I'm not going to let my personal political agenda get in the way of evaluating the facts and the law in each and every case and making the right, that sort of hard middle decision in each case.
Got it. And the last question from me is, and this comes from my friend who runs the Instagram Street People of Los Angeles. They got about 560,000 people, and they post news about what's going on in the city. And he wants to know, what's your position on Prop 36, which allows felony charges and increases sentences for certain drug and theft crimes?
So I'm actually a strong supporter of Proposition 36, not because it's going to reverse entirely Proposition 47. It's not. But what it's going to do, it struck a balance to focus on repeat offenders. They estimate that 20% of the people commit about 60% of the crime. So what Proposition 36 says is on the third conviction for theft, that third conviction can be felony eligible. Court can put you in prison, basically, for the third conviction. For drug use, again, the third conviction can be treatment mandatory. So all of a sudden, people who actually need to get the treatment actually can now get the treatment. For fentanyl, deal with your fentanyl issue earlier, it gives some really important tools to go after those fentanyl poisoners and send an absolutely unmistakably clear message that if you peddle your poison in our county, you're going to go to jail for as long as we can possibly put you in jail. So again, I think Proposition 36 has struck a balance. It needed, obviously, to get a broad range of support out there. I think it struck that balance.
Got it. And for everyone listening, I hope you go and vote on November 5th for Nathan Hochman. I think he's a change that we need to get back to normalcy and get rid of these, as he was talking about, these new social justice policies that were tried after the George Floyd incident that clearly are not working all over the country. And we're seeing DAs that follow that kind of ideology being handed losses. So I really hope on November 5th, we really come out and show what kind of change we want by seeing him win very handedly. I want to thank you for your time, Mr. Hochman. Would you like to tell people where they can find you at?
Certainly. My website's the best location. It's Nathan Hochman, and Hochman is HOCHMAN.com. You can link into all our social media through the website. We update it constantly. And thank you. Thank you very much for this opportunity to speak with you and to your listeners and followers. It's an incredibly important election in LA County. I mean, it will have more immediate effect on everyone's safety than, quite honestly, anything else on the ballot. So these are solvable crimes and solvable situations, not with the current DA, but with Nathan Hochman as your DA. I will work with this community to restore our safety.
Absolutely. And I hope after this, all my friends that live overseas that will not travel to Los Angeles anymore, you guys will come back and start spending your money in LA to make us happy again in a better economy.